Again, good evening and welcome to our webinar tonight. I am Sister Eilish McCullough and I serve on Network's grassroots mobilization team. Like so many of you, we at Network were reeling after the budget reconciliation votes in the Senate and the House. And I know we all hoped and we all prayed that the vote would have landed differently, especially after all of our advocacy work. But we're here tonight to tell you that that work was not in vain. We were disappointed, but this is not the end. Our work is not finished. And we are not finished advocating with and alongside the people in our communities, in our families, and our friends. Slide. So tonight we are talking about protecting SNAP, protecting Medicaid, and protecting families with the tagline that we are not finished. As we talk about at Network, this is long haul work. There's never quick fixes, and we need to be able to come together to reflect together and to move forward together. Slide. To prepare us for this next step, what we'll undertake in the next days, weeks, and months, tonight we are going to thank all of you first. Your work has given us the energy to keep going day in and day out. We will talk about the political dynamics at play. My colleagues from government relations will also share top line updates from HR 1 or from budget reconciliation on the issues that we've been working on for the past couple months, on Medicaid, on SNAP, on taxes like the child tax credit, and on immigration. And then we are going to talk about what we can do together and what we need you to do right now. So slide. Tonight, I am thrilled to be joined by my wonderful colleagues, by Laura Peralta Schulte, who is our Senior Director of Public Policy and Government Relations, Sister Emily Tukolsky, who serves on the Grassroots Mobilization team with me as the Grassroots Mobilization Coordinator, Jarrett Smith, who is our Senior Government Relations Advocate, Giovanna Oaxaca, who is our Senior Government Relations Advocate on Immigration, and Ralph McLeod, who is our Senior Fellow here at Network. And most excitingly for all of us is that tonight we are excited to introduce you to our new Executive Director. Slide, Chelsea. We are thrilled to welcome Laurie Carafone to our webinar tonight. She began as our Executive Director just on Monday. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Laurie.
Thank you so much, Sister Eilish. I am delighted to be with all of you tonight on just my third day at Network. Like many of you, I have been so inspired and energized by the work of Women Religious and of Network, and really the unique role that Network has played in faith-based advocacy for over 50 years. As I've shared the news with friends and colleagues about my new role, I've gotten big smiles followed by "Network is great and they really know their stuff." And only 72 hours in, I can tell you that they are right. A little bit about me. I am originally from Massachusetts. I earned my bachelor's degree in English from Dartmouth College, my law degree from the University of Michigan Law School, and a master's in theological studies from Harvard Divinity School. And for the past 13 years, I served at Kids in Need of Defense, working to protect unaccompanied children and advocate for their asylum and safety. At the heart of my leadership is a commitment to human dignity and collective liberation. I'm looking forward to my time with you, to learning from you, and moving deeper into community. In closing, I'll just say truly from my heart that I believe Network's commitment to dismantling poverty, promoting racial equity and advancing economic justice is what our country desperately needs right now. Together, we can build an economy for all. And I will now turn it over to Sister Emily.
Thanks, Laurie, and welcome to you. We're so glad to have you. And to all of those who are joining us on this webinar tonight, we want to start by talking about how this budget process and all of the work we did was only possible with you. So we want to say a big, loud thank you to all of you. You worked hard over these past 6 months, starting by introducing yourselves and network to your representatives' offices in January, delivering information about Network's 5 policy priorities. Do you even remember that? It feels like it was forever ago. Well, just in January alone, 145 advocates went on a total of 59 visits to offices ranging from Arizona to Michigan, Indiana to Washington State, California to Pennsylvania, and everywhere in between. In February, you continued this work, adding 45 visits to the offices of representatives across the country. And you started planning and attending more formal sit-down meetings with your representatives and their staff members to talk about the importance of SNAP and Medicaid in your communities. You invited to these meetings folks who will be impacted by these cuts, encouraging them to share their stories with their members of Congress. Next slide, please. These visits continued in March as you also expanded to writing letters to the editor that were published in your local newspapers. Through the course of this fight, Network advocates had 12 letters to the editor and 1 guest column published in your local newspapers, just about the work of budget reconciliation, and many more about other important topics as well. As the work in Congress ramped up, so did you, with visits to House members and senators continuing throughout the summer. You drove almost 2,500 calls to your congressional offices, and you showed up in person. Next slide, please. Advocates in Southeast Pennsylvania partnered with the New Sanctuary Movement of Philadelphia for a Keep Families Together prayer action, where approximately 50 people came together outside Senator McCormick's office to call on him to reject an immoral budget. Prior to the event, they delivered a letter to his office and connected with his regional director, a connection they used to help connect with the DC office that hadn't been responding to their outreach asking for a meeting. Next slide, please. Advocates in Cleveland hosted a prayer walk to support our immigrant neighbors, praying and advocating together against detention and deportation funding in the budget. Over 70 people showed up in the extreme heat for a 1.5-mile walk, which ended outside of the federal courthouse and the office of Senator Moreno. Their visible presence made a difference, as people leaving the courthouse offered their gratitude to the advocates for being there. Next slide, please. On June 24th, sisters, associates, and friends from across the country gathered in DC for Sisters Speak Out, protesting the harmful budget bill in nearly 100-degree weather before going to meet with their own senators and representatives. They spoke and prayed about the need for a moral budget, and they closed their day by meeting with Senator Raphael Warnock and Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. Congregations and friends around the country held over 40 local ECHO events in their own communities, further amplifying the narrative of this work. Next slide, please. Finally, you've all been showing up in your own communities at Hands Off and No Kings rallies and more, putting your bodies and your voices on the line to build a society and an economy that works for all of us, no exceptions. And if you do have photos of yourself at any recent event in your community, please send those to info@networklobby.org with a note to let us know who is in the photo and the date, name, and location of the event. Make no mistake, friends, we may not have won what we wanted in this legislative battle, but we are building something powerful and important together, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being a part of this work with us. And now I'll turn it over to Laura to talk about the policy.
It is wonderful to be with you all tonight. And Sister Emily, as you were talking, I mean, I almost got weepy, which I suppose is not good for somebody who has to present. But as we always say, we cannot win fights in Washington. They are won back home. So we are so deeply grateful for the work that you did to try to fight against this big, brutal budget. We're just going to talk a little bit about some of the big picture issues you are seeing, but we want to connect some dots for you as we review what happened in the budget fight. And then myself and my team, we're going to walk through some of the details. So let's jump right in terms of some of the big dynamics, big political takeaways that we're seeing. It is no surprise, my friends, that partisan polarization is at an all-time high. It continues a trend that we've been seeing in politics for a very, very long time. I think the innovation that we are seeing now in this trifecta, meaning the Republicans really being in charge of both branches of government and the White House, is that they're finding really innovative techniques to apply a partisan lens. And we'll talk about that in a bit. I think point number two that we just wanted to draw your attention to is something we've seen since your visits began in January, and that is even when there is some opposition from different factions of the Republican Party, just literally melting away in terms of pressure from the White House. We saw this everywhere from the budget debate in terms of the debt ceiling fight early in the year. It was certainly present in the context of the budget fight and is right now, as we're seeing the rescission package on the floor, it's in full play. So that is really a very big dynamic that we're seeing. And I just want to say, as we move forward in our discussion, to buck that trend is an act of political courage in this environment. So I do want to call out right up front, there were some Republicans that rejected this brutal budget. They are Senators Collins, Paul, and Tillis, and in the House, Brian Fitzpatrick, right outside of Philadelphia, and Tom Massey from Kentucky. So that is a hard thing to do as people, even who are diametrically opposed to policies, fall under the spell of the Trump administration. Number three is we've got to really understand that the Republican messaging from the time of the campaign through the budget bill has been extremely powerful in terms of them staying on message, framing it as tax cuts for working families, talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. Like it or not, they stayed on message. And even though this bill is ultimately about giving billions of dollars to billionaires and to those who are wealthy and taking away healthcare and food to pay for it, we've got our work cut out because they are very targeted on messaging and we have to meet that game. I think another piece that is really clear is that they are using this time in terms of the second administration, their deadlines very strategically. So we are seeing from the debt ceiling early in the year through, again, we need this bill by July 4th. They are really activating around deadlines and driving their members to get to yes, kind of, again, melting away the opposition by very strategic use of deadline. I think we are also seeing in the budget reconciliation process itself, there were some really big deviations in terms of, from a process side, of what is actually allowed and what they can do. So the takeaway that we want to leave with you, not to get in the weeds, is just the idea that they are eroding norms on Capitol Hill and in these processes to achieve their goals. Finally, and this is where the opportunity lies for us, there is a huge disconnect between the policy that they have told voters they are pursuing, working class being the major folks that they have said they are working on behalf of, and what they're actually doing. So it is that what I would call the great lie, where the opportunity comes to hold members accountable and to make sure that we are getting out there with the facts. And finally, it's something that we need to talk about, but we don't often talk about at Network. The accumulation of debt for a party that has long argued against debt is strategic, because I believe, and in terms of the letting go of $4 trillion of new debt, the strategy behind this is to put us in a place where they are going to say there's no choice but to cut particularly programs that are very sensitive, like Social Security and Medicare. They have already signaled that. So that is their bigger strategic goal. Go to the next one. So what happened? We won't recap the whole history, but just to know, in terms of the Senate, it was very close. It was by one vote. And the pressure tactics that were engaged on the floor of the Senate, I have never seen. Many of us stayed that night. It was incredible, with the vice president in the wing and members hanging over Lisa Murkowski. It got them to yes, the bill went forward. The House vote was close, but they did it. And the president signed the bill on July 4th. Big celebration at the White House while they are really passing a bill that gives millions and billions to the ultra wealthy at the expense of health, at the expense of food, and at the expense of safety. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of break down for you the healthcare pieces and then shift it to my colleagues. Next slide. So we know that this was a tax bill as kind of the bumper sticker that they gave us, but actually that healthcare was on the chopping block. So let's just talk real quickly about what they did to the programs that we care about. Big picture, we are looking at $1 trillion of funding taken away from Medicaid. This is according to the Congressional Budget Office. How did they do it? By mandating that adults who are eligible to work through the ACA expansion meet new work requirements, new reporting requirements. How did they do it? By repealing Biden's rule simplifying Medicaid eligibility and renewal processes, by establishing a moratorium on new and established provider taxes, by restricting state-directed payments to hospitals, to nursing facilities and other providers, and by increasing the frequency of eligibility redeterminations. The big picture of that is they are making it harder for people to access health. They are putting forward more red tape, more bureaucracy, understanding that it is the bureaucracy that is going to keep healthcare from people. These are people who are eligible who will fall out of the system because of these new systems in place. Next slide. There are also impacts on the exchange, the marketplace itself, that we need you to be aware of. One, they did nothing to expand the premium tax credits. Those are tax credits that have been fundamentally important to make sure that people who just made a little bit too much for Medicaid but cannot afford health insurance, it was the premium tax credit that allowed 22 million people to access healthcare in this country. They refused to move those forward. That is going to lead to higher premiums and fewer people insured. That is going to hurt our communities, and we cannot let that stand. Another change that they made, again, on the theory of let's make it harder as a way to keep people out of the system, they are shortening the open enrollment period, meaning that people have less time to sign up for healthcare. They are restricting the criteria for when you can get into the system through special enrollment periods when you have major issues, changes of circumstance, and you need your healthcare. And they are putting the administrative burdens on the backs of our family to make it difficult to get healthcare. Next slide. We have not spoken a lot about Medicare, my friends, but I do want to flag for you that in the final hours of the bill, there were provisions put in that will have major implications for Medicare. It was a backdoor way to go after that program. So this bill paves the way for bigger Medicare rollbacks. Why? Because it's going to trigger the accumulation of debt is going to trigger massive cuts in the tune of $500 billion to the program. It also strips away coverage from current enrollees who are lawful immigrants in our country. Ralph is going to walk through a little bit more of how immigrant communities were thrown under the bus in this bill. It also halts rules that make nursing homes safer. Those are rules that many of us push forward in the Biden administration to make sure that people living in nursing homes have the care they need to thrive. Finally, two other things that are impacted from a Medicare standpoint. It cuts and reduces beneficiary access to some cost assistance programs. Remember, even with Social Security, too many folks live in poverty in their older years. And so those programs that help them pay for very essential health supports are going to disappear. And finally, in a big giveaway to pharma, they end the obligation to negotiate drug prices, which again is a big payoff for the industry, but hurts people who are trying to afford medicine and makes it more expensive for our government. So not a good story to tell on the healthcare front. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ralph McLeod, who's going to talk to you about food and talk to you a little bit about impacts on our immigrant friends.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you here this evening. It's as mentioned earlier, we're not finished. One of the sad casualties of this bill was the supplemental nutrition and assistance program, food basically for many of our siblings around the country. And we're not finished. We're going to walk with the 22.3 million United States families that are going to be affected, continue to walk with and advocate on their behalf. You know, nutrition has been a problem. Food has been a problem already in our communities. And right now, this particular bill just exacerbates the problem. Of these 22.3 million, 5.3 will lose at least $25 in benefits each month. And this is about 3.3 million families with children. And for those who will suggest, well, why don't they just find jobs and why don't they just don't work? That of these folks who are struggling with nutrition issues and nutrition problems, nearly 2 million of them already, 2 million are families with full-time, full-year jobs that are working. Next slide, please. They did it by gutting the thrifty food plan, by adding more stringent work requirements that were already very difficult to attain and to achieve. They slashed the state matching fund requirements, and they restricted many eligibility components of some non-citizens. They were very, very oppressive across the board in the supplemental nutrition assistance program. Please, next slide. Prior to the bill, U.S. already had dramatically restricted immigrant access to federal programs. This particular bill will strip innocent immigrants' access to health and nutrition access programs, kind of across the board, really. Non-citizens will still remain eligible for Medicaid, CHIP, Medicare, and premium tax credits under the Affordable Care Act, or lawful permanent citizens, certain Cuban and Haitian nationals, and some residents and small groups of United States territories. You know, as we witnessed across the board this huge anti-immigrant sentiment, and this is a more attacking on our siblings, our brothers and sisters who are struggling from other portions of the world who are here with us in the United States. Next slide, please. With that, I would pass it on the next portion of our conversation to my colleague, Jared. Jared?
Thank you so much, Ralph. It is great to be with you all this evening. Before I begin, I want to mention that some of the charts that I'm going to show you later in my presentation are from our friends at the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, ITEP, which is a DC tax think tank. So last month, we all gathered and I spoke about the some of the provisions in the Big Brutal Budget Act, and the focus was on the child tax credit. So, child tax credit is in the legislation. It is going to be $2,200 per child going forward. It is now permanent. But there are some changes to the child tax credit that will see millions of our friends, family members, our neighbors locked out of receiving the child tax credit. Approximately 2.7 million kids who would have qualified in 2025 will lose access. That is because in this legislation that the president signed on the 4th of July, I don't think there was much of a party for those of us that want to see all of us receive these type of benefits. At least one parent or guardian must have a social security number. That is very new and the first time we have seen that regarding the child tax credit. Another thing that we are going to see is an estimated 19 million children are now blocked from receiving the full credit. That is because of how much money you earn, you will only receive 17 or $1,700 per child, and so $500 will not make it into your household. Next slide, please. So, where are all these benefits that have been talked about in this big, brutal budget bill going? Well, the wealthiest in this country will receive 45% of the net tax cuts next year, starting in 2026. The wealthiest 1% will receive an average net tax cut of $66,000. The wealthiest 1%, now can you believe this? The wealthiest 1% will receive a total of 117 billion in tax cuts in 2026. The middle 20%, to put this in context, includes 20 times as many taxpayers as the wealthiest 1%. If you go to the next slide, please. And we can see this in a chart form. A picture is worth a million words nowadays. And you can see where the tax cut is going to help the majority of people that are going to receive it. The poorest 20%, you're going to receive little to nothing. And if you are part of the richest 20%, you will receive a huge majority of the benefit of the tax cut. Next slide, please. So this is to look at it in economic terms. So if you make anywhere from $0 to $27,000 working, you will see somewhere in around $40 in a tax cut. If you are part of the 1% crowd, you will see around $66,000. Next slide, please. So we have seen that this big, brutal budget bill is helping the wealthiest people in this country, and it is also impacting something that all of us here worked on in the last administration, the climate tax cuts that were part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was an opportunity for us to push back on climate change. But in this piece of legislation, that is no more. You will see immediate rollback of the clean energy tax credits, which will get affordability and momentum for wind, solar, EVs. September 30th is the last day, last day of this month and day of this year that you could get the EV tax credit. New barriers will be presented for prohibited foreign entities and add extreme complexity and compliance burdens. The law simultaneously expands tax breaks for the old energy industry, oil and gas and coal. And we will see changes that risk increasing electricity prices because the subsidies that families around this country need every month are going to disappear. What does this all mean? That prices for something that all of us need, energy costs are going to go up. That is going to hit all families in this country. The idea that when this administration came into office, that people's prices, um, pocketbook prices, things that people have to deal with every day would come down, and those are primarily energy prices. That is just not the case. Um, all the hard work we appreciate it here at Network, and all the things that you've done, sending LTEs, making calls to try to move things like the child tax credit and all the work you did in the IRA. We appreciate it, and we will continue that advocacy going forward. But it is going to be tough because this administration has eliminated all of these tax credits for climate that were doing wonderful things around this country, providing jobs for many Americans. And the quiet secret is many of those jobs were in red states. So we will see big changes when it comes to the cost of energy in this country. Next slide, please. So I would just want to finish by saying thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the tax components in the big, brutal budget bill. And I'm available for any questions at the end of the presentation. I would like to now toss it to my colleague Gio. She will discuss immigration and implications in the bill.
Thank you so much, Jared. So there's a lot to cover in this bill, specifically related to immigration, but I want to focus just a little bit more on the spending, because you've heard my colleagues from Laura and Jared to Ralph talk about all these cuts. Well, the other half of it is that there's a major windfall for immigration detention, enforcement, and deportations, and it's not being talked about enough. So you've probably heard me say that this reconciliation bill represents a generational threat to our families and our communities by expanding this detention and deportation apparatus, but it also increases the costs of maintaining lawful status and work permits, and it also eliminates access to vital services and programs for certain immigrants, like we've heard Ralph and Laura talk about. All told, the bill has about $170.7 billion for immigration and border enforcement, which can be used imminently and over the next 4 years. There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of fear, but to me, moral clarity lies in recognizing the undue harm this will cause our neighbors, our families, and our loved ones, and in embracing our own responsibility to act to change these circumstances. Next slide. Really quickly, if we could play this simulation that shows just how rapidly the detention facilities have come online over the last several years. What you'll see is that we've always hovered around 350 or so active facilities, but over time, there have been even more facilities coming online, and we can see that number explode with the type of funding that this bill provides. Next slide. So to add a little bit more context, the ICE raids that we've seen around the country from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City, Utah, are becoming more aggressive and more frequent, and this is fueling fear and distress in our communities. We're witnessing an unprecedented escalation, so much so that some church leaders have had to begin offering special Sunday Mass dispensations to support their members who are too fearful to attend. Let me say that again. Some church leaders have begun to offer special dispensations so that they don't have to go in person to a place of worship because they're too afraid to follow their faith. Popular markets, retail businesses have also been forced to temporarily close, and in the agricultural sector and other businesses, large-scale worksite raids have increasingly disrupted our food supply chain and made it harder for working families to make ends meet. This deportation first, ask questions later policy is also creating a moral minefield for US citizens, lawful permanent residents, immigrants with no criminal history, as well as for the businesses and just people around who are trying to navigate all these chaotic measures. And to add even more flesh, according to the latest data from ICE as of June 29th, the number of people in custody had reached 58,000. We only have detention capacity for about 41,500. That's what Congress allocated for this year, but we've already seen that number surpassed. ICE made a record number of arrests in June, and there's been, according to ICE's own statistics, a 16-fold increase in the number of people detained at any one time who do not have a criminal history. These individuals and families are being detained across a sprawling network of approximately 436 for-profit prisons, county jails, and other facilities where people have been crammed into overcrowded rooms with no showers, inadequate food and water, and very little ways to contact their families to tell them where they are. And if you are living in Florida, perhaps you've heard about the Everglades detention camp, which we should be using to refer to instead of Alligator Alcatraz. It's also been drawing sharp attention to the ways that states are fueling the federal expansion detentions, the expansion of the detention system federally. So there's room for about 3,000 adults there. There is specific funding in this bill that we've been talking about to enable states to be reimbursed for immigration enforcement and for detaining non-citizens. Next slide. Specifically, this bill provides approximately $45 billion for family and adult detention. This is a 265% increase from ICE's current annual detention budget, and this is more than the budget of the entire federal prison system. This is more than the budget of the entire federal prison system, all towards the aim of increasing detention capacity to 100,000 detention beds. There's also approximately $13.5 billion for state immigration and border enforcement cost reimbursements. And there are additional, increases in spending for hiring new ICE agents, hiring new ICE lawyers, capping the number of judges that we can have in the system at any time to help adjudicate and process cases. There's also a significant increase in funding, like I said, for empowering the state and federal collaboration on federal immigration and enforcement. And on the border, if we could go to the next slide. We are going to see about approximately $46.5 billion used to construct new and replacement border walls and structures, approximately 2,300 miles. And we will see approximately $10 billion to reimburse states specifically for border costs, and billions of new dollars brought to hire new Border Patrol agents, Customs and Border Protection, Office of Field Operations officers, and other staff and personnel. Not to mention that HR 1 also includes $1 billion for Department of Defense border operations and detention. So further entrenching, militarizing of the border. Altogether, of course, this is a very significant increase for interior enforcement and militarization at the border, which as you can see, is expensive, but it's also deadly. Next slide. A few key takeaways that I want to make sure I leave you with is that some of the other provisions that we've heard talk about take effect 1 to 2 years from now. The effective date for the spending of all of this money on enforcement in our communities and at the border that can come online imminently. As soon as the money is in the accounts, it can be used to pay private prison corporations for the contracts that they've already established, months in advance. The immigration fees that I only briefly touched on at the beginning of my presentation, those can go into effect immediately. And in fact, we've already heard from lawyers and other organizations that these fees are being demanded now that people are filing for affirmative asylum or for other making other immigration applications. So I do want to mention that there is cause for hope, which is that as people have seen mass deportations and their neighbors being kidnapped by masked ICE agents in the streets just for being themselves, the support for the president's immigration policies has cratered quite significantly, with majorities of people opposing the president's immigration actions. And furthermore, and perhaps more impressively, people turning away from that and saying, actually, we support giving a pathway to legal status or having more benevolent or compassionate immigration policies. For now, what can we do? We must continue to demand accountability. We must continue to amplify real stories and continue to support fair legislation and just policies for the hard work ahead. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back to Laura.
Thank you so much, Gio. It is hard to follow that. There is so much sadness as we move forward. But I think that the silver lining that you pointed out in terms of public opinion and the need to be in community, just feel that very strongly. So what's ahead from the big bad law? So they have tried to play a little bit of a trick on the American people in terms of how they have sequenced taking away different benefits from different folks. You heard Gio just say that in terms of the immigration measures, they're immediate, but they're trying to hide the ball on some of the issues they know are going to be of a political concern for them as members go into elections in 2016. So this was a chart created by another partner. We work in partnership with so many brilliant people, a groundwork cooperative. We will send this to you so that you have it. But what you can see from it is the deadlines for when things actually take effect are staggered. So as it relates to the SNAP provisions, they are upon enactment. So the provisions that Ralph talked about in terms of new work requirements and making it more difficult for families to get food, that comes in early. You also see right up front the energy pieces that Jarrett talked about. Let's go ahead, though, and look at where they're trying to hide the ball. And that in particular is in the healthcare section, where you see that in terms of some of the healthcare deadlines, they put them to become active in January of 2027. And if that isn't the most cynical action, let me put the political frame on that for those who may not see it right away. They think that they can hide what they did from their voters so that they can maintain support. And so that those same voters that they're hoping put them back in office are the ones that are going to lose their health care. Our mission is to hold these members accountable. What does that mean? We're going to get instructions from Emily at the end of it, but part of it is going to make sure that people in your communities actually know what is in the bill so that they can make informed decisions and evaluate, whether or not this is a just or an unjust bill. Let's go to the next slide. Right now, I know the network folks well enough to know y'all are reading the paper. You know that there is a package on the Senate today as we speak, where the effort is for coming from the White House, the request to grab back some of the money that was allocated in the last appropriations bill. It's an innovative technique that they are doing. It is completely wrong, where they're trying to move away again from a bipartisan agreement on a budget that was passed to grab money from programs that they don't like. And they are using very, very arcane law to move it forward so that it avoids the filibuster. You only need a 51-point vote rather than the normal 60 votes required in the Senate. So when we're talking about finding new forms of partisanship, this is prime to say both the innovation that they're moving forward with, very dangerous to take back money from programs they personally don't like, the pressure on members to just acquiesce to what the administration is looking for, all that harm our families. We also know that the appropriations process for 2026 is in full swing. Those negotiations, those discussions are going on now, both in the House and Senate. The headline there is the majority party is looking for major cuts. There's a consistency, at least in terms of what they're looking for, major cuts in the programs that we care about. And we will bring you more on that as the process moves forward. Finally, the pen had barely been put down and the signature of the president signed when we're getting calls from leaders in the House and in the Senate, again, leadership that we need to get ready for a possible second budget reconciliation. So let's step back and see where we are. We know this administration has been relentless since the time they took power in January. We know that they are not finished with their agenda, but you know what? We have not either. And so right now I'm gonna turn it over to Sister Emily, who's gonna tell us what our marching orders are, because we are not done fighting, and we are so happy to be with you in that fight. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Laura. Friends, some of our elected officials think they can take food off our tables and healthcare from our communities with impunity, that they don't have to answer for the policy murder they vote for. But we know better. When we act together to build a society where the truth spreads faster than a well-funded lie, when we build community and have hard conversations, when we share the truth with our neighbors and friends, when we show up for each other at a food pantry or a rally, we change our communities. We make sure our communities know what our elected officials voted for. We ensure our neighbors know the value of their vote and show up at the polls. We make our voices heard over the phone and in the streets, and we're in it for the long haul. So today we're asking you to do a few things. 1, email your representative and both senators about their votes. If they voted against this bill, thank them. If they voted for it, point out to them the ways their vote will harm your community for the foreseeable future. We'll send you links in the follow-up email tomorrow to make your emails a little easier. Number 2, write letters to the editor to name the harmful effects of this bill. From the beginning, some proponents of the bill have been paying for false advertising and spreading lies about what's in the bill, and we won't let them get away with it. At Network, we operate by a simple equation. Organized people plus organized money equals power. They may have lots of money, but we have lots of people. And as we get more and more organized, the power of the people will win over the power of money. Number 3, talk to the people in your life about this bill, especially those who don't follow policy quite as much as you do. Let them know what's in the bill and why you're worried. You are a trusted messenger to people who know you. Your honesty and integrity speak for themselves. And number 4, go to the rallies and public events in your community. Meet people there. Be a visible presence of what your values are. Print some of those network signs you saw in some of those early photos and take them with you. We'll send the files out to you in the email tomorrow, but the 11x17 signs can be printed on cardstock from some home and office printers. The larger ones you can get from a print shop. Over the next few weeks, we'll also reach out with a few more opportunities to continue spreading the word. In the meantime, be sure to save these dates. Next slide, please. Tomorrow, July 17th is the Good Trouble Lives On John Lewis Day of Action. And July 27th, next Saturday, a week from this coming Saturday, is the Family's First Day of Action. On both of these days, advocates will be gathering in their communities across the nation to push for a society and an economy that works for all of us. No exceptions. We'll send you links in the follow-up email to find out about local events in your communities. And if there's not one already planned in your area, consider whether you and a few friends can help create one. Next slide, please. Finally, please consider whether you're able to financially support our fight for the economy for all. The work you heard about tonight is only possible because of people like you, who are part of a network of over 94,000 supporters. Your donation, no matter the amount, makes a difference. Thank you. Now back to Sister Eilish.
Thank you so much, Emily, and to all of my wonderful colleagues for sharing so much information with all of you. And at this point, I would invite our panelists, Jarrett, Laura, Giovanna, and Ralph, to come back on screen. And we have only about 7 minutes for Q&A. So there is amazing questions in the chat. If we do not get to your question, feel free to email me and I will make sure that you get an answer. So the first kind of two questions that we have really go hand in hand. The first one is, why weren't some people as upset with this great transfer of wealth that occurred than most of us? And then the second question to that is, even with the polarization and positions of Republicans, are there specific strategies and messages that we can develop to reach them once the impact of the cuts really begins to impact voters? And so I'll turn it over to whomever wants to answer that.
I'm happy to take a shot and the others can jump in. So let me start with some good news. And the good news that we're seeing in poll after poll is when people actually know what is in this bill, they do not like it. And that does not just mean the progressive folks, that means independents, and that means Republicans. Because remember, they ran on a campaign about bringing down the costs to families. They ran on a campaign that said that they were going to center the lives of working people and make it better for them. They said they were going after criminals, immigrant criminals. Giovanna, I'm putting in quotes because I don't want to offend. And that was a lie all along. This is Stephen Miller's dream of jailing families in America. So our job is really, and why Emily's comments were so important. We need to actually be messengers to those family members that let's call it what it is, voted for Trump, and have a conversation, because we know as that your relationships can foster that kind of conversation, and the materials that we will provide you will be very helpful to shine light into the situation. The money that is being spent right now by folks who want to sell the bill in the corporate community and others is massive. And so we have an uphill battle to fight, but together we can do it.
And I would just add, if I may, that Republicans, they when they talked about this bill, they called it fraud, waste, and abuse, and that's what they were trying to get at, rather than getting into the details regarding Medicaid or nutrition programs. If you watched any news channels, Republicans, either in the House or Senate, did not want to talk about the details. They wanted to talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. So, like Laura said, we need to, talk to our friends, family members, neighbors, and let them know what's really in this bill. Because once people see that their health care will be taken away, that food supports are going to disappear, they do not like this bill, and they do not understand why their representatives in the House and Senate voted for it.
I think it's important too not to fall for cliches. I mean, cliches or jargon. You know, be it big beautiful bill or be it waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, this is about people, about people's lives. These are persons, and to the degree we can put the hurt in front of folks in a way that they can see it, and in a real way share in some of that pain, transformation can happen.
Amen, Ralph. And now for another question we have is about the rescissions package that's going through Congress right now. And I think we've seen some of it on the news. Laura, you touched on this a little bit in your presentation. But how will it, or will it, impact everything that we've talked about with budget reconciliation?
Jarrett, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Rescissions, it is not new in the idea that Congress, they look at the accounts and, sometimes money is just not spent for whatever reasons, and then they try to move the money to different accounts. What is unique about this situation is the White House, at the direction of President Trump and his senior staff, has asked for money that was already approved by Congress, that he signed into law, to be taken away from particular programs. It is a threat to appropriations going forward, not so much appropriations in the past. Because if you are on the Democratic side, why would you want to negotiate any type of appropriations bill in FY26 or going forward if the president is just going to come in and take away that money? That's not how appropriations has worked in this country. And that's why this is a big threat and a big problem. And you saw some of that in last night's vote in the Senate to move the rescissions package forward. And those senators, Republican senators that voted against it, are all appropriators because they are getting an earful from their Democratic colleagues led by Senator Murray from Washington State that is telling them that if you guys go in this direction, it is going to be almost impossible to pass a future appropriations bill.
Can I just say one thing, and knowing the time, I believe they're going to get this bill because the Republicans, both in the House and Senate, are crumbling as we speak right now. And if they get one, all of our programs are at risk because they know that this is a process that can work to undermine this, a political discussion with a 51-point vote with the vice president doing it. There's going to some big problems ahead. So it is hyper partisan. It is wrong. It is destabilizing, as Jarrett said.
And with that, just kind of one final question. We know the political dynamics that we're living in right now, but we know that it's not time for us to give up hope and to give up the fight in what we're doing. And at Network, we have so many incredible resources that are going to be coming out in your follow-up email that we're going to be rolling out in the next couple weeks for you to use. But Laura, what, people need to keep calling their members right now as they're voting on the rescissions package, as these things are happening, to talk about what's important in their communities, right?
At some point, this is going to break. And it might be for some very different reason. But at some point, when we organize, this will break. I'm going to, Ralph, maybe can you just tie, because we got to land with the person and we need a little bit of the gospel. So can you just, in terms of just connecting and the importance of connecting in community, why don't you close with some wisdom?
Well, a couple of things. Many of us last weekend, last Sunday in the Sunday gospel, it spoke to, it was the gospel about who is our neighbor. And the neighbor that was identified was the person who's the least likely, most ethnically diverse, nowhere near the neighborhood. That as we talk about that, we realize that those outside of oftentimes our comfort zone are the ones we should be advocating for. Those are the ones we should be speaking out for. Those are the ones who we should try to, as Pope Francis used to say, try to encounter and share in some of their difficulties. So be they immigrant, be they urban, be they rural, I mean, our neighbors need us now. They're in desperate need of us right now. As was mentioned earlier, in terms of calling and writing, I mean, our legislators should recognize our phone numbers on their caller IDs, and that we ought to be calling that often and that frequently, that they know who we are, know what we're calling about, and be able to finish our sentences for us. So I think, you know, in terms of pestering them, in terms of letting them know that as was mentioned earlier, we're not done. We're not finished. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be speaking out for our neighbors, and our neighbors are vast and wide.
Amen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We did not even begin to touch on all of the questions that we received. So if you did not get an answer to your question, please email me when we send out materials tomorrow. Email me with your question. I will try to get back to you. I'll try to respond off of the chat for tonight, and we'll make sure that you get answers. On behalf of all of us at Network, again, thank you to all of you for getting on tonight's webinar. Thank you to and welcome to Laurie for joining us tonight. Just 3 days in, it was so great to have you here. To Giovanna, Ralph, Jarrett, Sister Emily, and a huge thank you to Chelsea for running tech tonight. And again, we cannot do this without you. Make sure you follow us on social media at Network Lobby, and we'll see you next time. Have a great night.